to live for the future is an indefinite postponement of life. You go through in your education a whole series of steps. The word in Latin, gradus, means a step. So we have first grade, second grade, third grade, gradus, gradus, gradus. Finally become a graduate. You know, you've gone along the steps. But you're still doing it. So that when you become finally successful as the president of your corporation, you have a funny feeling of being cheated. You've climbed the stairway and you've got to the top, and there's nowhere else to go. And since you've never been taught to live in the present, you don't know how to. So an insurance salesman comes around and says, listen, I've got the very thing for you, retirement program. Because when you're 65, you'll drop out of the system. And then you'll really be able to enjoy yourself, see, despite your prostate trouble, menopause, false teeth, and everything else. And the art of living in the eternal now is not taught in our educational system. And it's not taught because it's thought of as being feckless, irresponsible. It isn't irresponsible at all. It is everybody's duty, I could put it that way, to enjoy themselves. Because if you don't do that, you become a nuisance. You become aggressive, you become a robber, you become a thief, you become somebody who's trying to organize the rest of the world, that is to say, a power maniac, simply because you haven't learned the very simple, inexpensive art of living in the present moment. It really doesn't take an awful lot of energy to maintain a human life. If you really consider what you need to eat, what you need to wear, how much housing you have to have, it comes down to something quite simple. And the simpler, the more you have the capacity to enjoy watching a raindrop crawl down a window. But if you watch a raindrop crawl down a window and you think, my, look at that, everybody says, you're crazy. Aren't you watching a raindrop fall down a window? Can't you find something more important to do? That means, can't you make more trouble than that? So the mentality that doesn't recognize the importance of watching a raindrop crawl down a window is the one that is creating the trouble in the world today. Say, you are of no value, you're not even human, unless you're changing things, unless you're interfering, unless you're progressing. We confuse growing with progressing. Unless something is happening, a great operation, a new project is going on, and you're busy with it, we say, well, you're lazy. You're good for nothing. Because you are not working for the future. But they say, if you're working for the future, you're quite mad. So they don't work for the future. Just like a Chinese coolie works long enough to make some money. Then he knocks off work and he goes to the gambling joint. And he gambles. Or he smokes opium. Or just generally wanders around and digs the scene. And we say, well, that's awful. That's irresponsible. You can't do that. That's not maintaining the world properly. What do you think? Maybe that is maintaining the world properly. Maybe it's we who think that everything should be progressing who are destroying the world. Of course we are. By our Protestant ethic, by our notion of keeping everything in charge, it's true. We have a great initial success. We destroy diseases. We keep people alive. But on the end is the H-bomb, to get rid of it all entirely. So these non-political people are saying to us, The trouble with you is you don't know what you want. You have a future which you're working for, but you're all wretch and no vomit. You promised yourselves that a good thing is going to happen. You keep promising. Even your money is a promise. It says on the dollar bill that the Treasury of the United States will promise to pay $1. What are you going to get if you deliver this and say, come on now, I want whatever it is that this dollar is? And they just can give you credit. Because it's paper, it's all symbolism. So all these myriads of so-called primitive people, like Amerindians, Mexican Indians, Africans, don't communicate with us, and we don't communicate with them, because they don't want what we think is the desirable good society. Well, some of them do, of course. So in Japan, for example, the Japanese have been thoroughly conned into the idea that the Western way of life is a great thing. And so they are, by and large, frantic industrialists. And so, as a result, the cities of Nara, Osaka, Kobe are covered in smog. Tokyo is just a madhouse. They're getting it. So the whole point is, the future is an illusion. The basic ideas in Hindu cosmology, that in the course of time, you go through the series of yugas, or the epochs, and you begin with a great state of affairs, and it gradually deteriorates, is a way of saying to people, in the course of time, things only fall apart. Therefore, get out of time. Get off the wheel of samsara, the rat race. So this underlies my idea of what I call the politics of diversion. Divert Western man from history, from the notion that he is in a historical process which is leading to something always better and better and better, but which in fact only leads to more and more destruction. Divert people from time by living a style of life which is timeless and which is therefore more attractive than life devoted to time. That doesn't exclude our technological power. Part of the whole point of technology is that through technology, we have the power to obliterate poverty completely. But this must not be looked at in a historical way. While it is looked at in a historical way, it will not work. That is to say, the whole problem of money and the distribution of the wealth of the world as produced by technology is a psychological problem and not a material problem. People are hypnotized with money, which is the symbol of wealth, as if it was something that was valuable in its own right. That's the confusing money with gold. When Ramakrishna said that one of the evils of the world was gold, he was, I think, perhaps unconsciously quite correct. There's a story that once upon a time, all the banks in the world got tired of shipping gold from country to country. And so they decided to open an office in an island in the Pacific where all the banks had their headquarters and all the gold was put together there, so that all they needed to do when they had to exchange some gold was to trundle it across the street. And operations proceeded beautifully for about 10 years. And then all the heads of the banks from the different countries came with their wives and their children to visit the island and have a great convention. And so they inspected the books and the transactions, and everything was in perfect order. At last the children said, "Daddy, want to see the gold?" And so the bank president said to the managers, "Take our children down to the vaults so that they could see the gold." And so all those managers said, it's sort of difficult and a little problematic and it takes a lot of time. And the president said, well, don't be stupid. What's the matter? Can't they see the gold? So they hummed and hawed and said, well, we're sorry to report that 7 years ago there was a disastrous subterranean earthquake and all the gold was swallowed up. But of course, we all knew how much we had at that time, and so we've kept the books accordingly. So it's a joke. People don't realize, in other words, that money is bookkeeping. Nothing but bookkeeping. And therefore, the whole idea of taxation, for example, is a complete anachronism. The thing that is stopping the flow of the actual wealth of the world is this fixation on money. What you need to do is actually reverse taxation and issue, instead of charging taxes, issue credit. Then, but you have to keep the credit balanced to the gross national product in some form of figuring, and then everybody can circulate what they're making. Otherwise, you're in this ridiculous situation where people are starving in India, and we are hoarding food supplies and burning them and dumping them in the ocean, which is sheer insanity. But it's all based on a psychological block about money. So, this kind of psychological block is what in Indian philosophy would be called a maya. It is an illusion, and it's the same kind of illusion as that of the future, of the idea that the future is when we're really going to live. And if that's the way you operate, when you get there, you're never going to be able to handle it because you still want a future ahead of you. You're a perpetual donkey with a carrot suspended from your collar on a rod like this, and you're pursuing it.